Hey moms, it's Laura Ollinger. Welcome to the Positively Healthy Mom podcast. Because there's no manual for the hardest job in the world. Welcome to part 2 of my conversation with Jessyka Coulter, CEO and founder of Ace Cookie Tutoring.
So I think I'm ready to kind of switch gears over to the moms specifically, because that is our audience. That is who is listening. So what can you offer? I mean, everything that they're hearing now, I'm sure is helpful, but what can you offer specifically to the moms that would be helpful to them? And I know there's probably such a wide range of issues that you encounter that I don't know if you could kind of like encompass it all into one idea, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So the simplest thing, Laura, that I can say to our mamas is the fact that we have to help them, and we have to help them realize how important it is that they believe their teens know how to learn, that their teens can learn. So like we talked about how important it is for mamas to value education. Well, they have to believe it themselves 100%, but then they have to make sure their teens know that too. And the same thing goes for mamas believing in their teens. I don't need the mamas to believe my teen, is going to be like valedictorian, top of the class. Mm-hmm. But I want all of our mamas to believe 100% my kid can learn. And I want them to share that belief with their teens, like make it without a doubt, because we don't ever want our teens to think that they're dumb. Like we don't ever want to believe that the people that are supposed to be there for them, that are having their backs, don't believe in them.
I think that is so powerful. I love that so much, because like we were just talking about earlier, we've talked about how in the past thoughts create feelings, feelings create behaviors, behaviors create results. But the things that create our thoughts are the beliefs. Yes. So whether it's our own beliefs or the people around us, specifically like our parents, if we know my mom has a belief that I'm dumb, then I'm probably going to believe that I'm dumb, that I'm going to think I'm dumb, I'm going to feel dumb, I'm going to act dumb, and I'm going to, perform in a dumb way. And, it's that cycle. And so that comes down to identity, which is something that I work on a lot with my clients. And so if a client, and this is where, I've noticed that the confidence really kind of creeps up as a challenge on the ADHD kids, because they lack the confidence because they think, oh, I don't know how to concentrate. I'm not organized. And they fill their brain with these things when really they are incredibly intelligent people. They just need to learn how to do things that work best for their brains. And so what do you say to that when a kid is really struggling with that confidence?
Well, we start with kind of what confidence like even looks like. And then we talk about kind of why we need confidence. Because I struggled that when I added that to my Love to Learn program. It was like, do I teach them just some like techniques about like self-esteem and growth mindset and all those kind of things? Or do we need to focus more on the why do we even care about confidence? And so I have a lot of students that are beyond surprised when I tell them we need to have confidence to do something as simple as raise your hand in class, or you have to be confident enough to actually turn in that work. Because there's a lot of teens, they would rather get a 0 than let the teacher know that they didn't get it. Like they would just rather pretend, it was a stupid assignment, I'm not going to do it, instead of let them see, I only knew how to do problem number 1.
Yes, I've seen that with my clients as well. And then what else can you offer for moms who are in the challenge of kind of this tug of war or power struggle? I see some parents who are very hyper vigilant about checking their kids' grades online and checking, you have this missing assignment. And they're kind of like controlling the process. And then there's others that maybe don't do that, but there's still some type of internal battle, but battle within the home, right? About like, why aren't you doing this? When are you going to do that? And it's very stressful for the teen, but yet if the teen's not performing, the mom doesn't know what else to do, right? And so she kind of gets a little bit aggressive. So what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I don't know what our listeners are going to think, but I would tell you, Laura, that the reason I work with the teens and the teens alone is because I want them to know how to learn. Like I want them to be in charge of their learning. I need that advocacy piece. I need that accountability piece. And so for all of our mamas that, have teens that aren't doing well, the question becomes, is the team not doing well because that's what the teen's chosen to do, or because the team doesn't know any better? And so, unfortunately, sometimes the mamas kind of have to back off. I know I'm not a parent, so I can only imagine how hard that is, especially when you see your teen struggling. But at the same time, until that student kind of falls on her face, we don't really know, does the teen care? Because like one of my students right now, I'm teaching her these skills, but she's not filling out the workbook. She's not really doing what I want her to do between lessons. I'm telling mom's, encouraging. Every time we talk in our lessons, mom does this, and I'm just kind of like, okay, you're an 8th grader, about to be 9th grader. I don't feel like she's ready for high school. And I just think it's because she doesn't know how to do these things on her own. Like, I really wish her mom would just be hands off and be like, when you're meeting with Jessyka, when your lesson is, you know what she asked you to do. So do it or don't. And it's your kind of, I don't want to say your fault, but I should say the word consequences, Laura. Like, I feel like that's something that we need to make sure our teens get to experience. And I say get to, not have to, for a very specific reason.
Yes, I love that language, and I love that the use of the word. And so, that can be hard, and so maybe that's like kind of my zone, is sometimes managing the parents as well. And so it sounds like that's something that you have to do and, have them back up. And so some parents are very averse to their child failing. Yes. And I don't mean just failing like with an F on a grade, but I mean failing in a way that is a lesson to be learned, so they can recover and bounce back up and say, ooh, that didn't feel so good. I don't want to do that anymore. And so like, what would you say, just as a advice to a mom of like how that can help their kid if you just kind of hands off, let them fail?
Well, I would ask mama what her goal is for her child. And then I would ask that mama to ask her child, what is your goal? Because a lot of times parents have different goals than their teens do. And that could be problem number one. When you were talking about that battle in the house, it comes down to the teen thinks, C's are okay. If a mom is like, it's A's or nothing, or, you have to play this sport, or you have to be part of this activity. And the teen's like, this is the worst thing ever. My friend's doing this. I want to go do that thing instead. Right.
And that's, something we talk about too, is like values, there's the family values, there's the mom's values, there's the dad's value. Like everybody has their own values. So how does that work within the household? So, it's funny how that really just infiltrates into what are the values that we want for your grades? We expect all A's, or we're okay if you just do your best. I have lots of parents who say, I just want my kid to be happy, and that's all I care about. And so to kind of like answer my own question, as far as like kind of letting go or hands off and letting a kid fail, is I like to emphasize like short-term versus long-term. Yeah. So, and I think that that's what your study skills program is all about, because it's like, you're not just getting a quick fix of they understand how to do this specific math formula, but it's like they know how to learn, so then they can help themselves. And so that's what I really emphasize too. Like, if they get a C or a D or an F when they're in 7th grade, who cares, right? Who cares? It's like some people are honestly allergic to that. They're like, cannot handle it. And it's like, but it's going to set your child up to fail or succeed in the future if they have that little bit of pain right now, because they're like, oop, that didn't feel good. I don't want to do that again. So then what about the kid who, surely you've come across these types who it just doesn't seem like anything is getting through. Like no matter what, they are just like struggling and they're not recovering. Like, how do you kind of tackle that?
Yeah, I feel like there's 3 buckets of kids that I work with. So I've got the kids like you're just talking about, the kids that they've struggled, like they have struggled forever and don't have any idea what it's like to be successful. We've got the kids that are good at some things, struggle sometimes, but not all the time. And then you've got the kids that are totally fine until they're suddenly not. And so like the kids that, are like that first bucket that just nothing seems to be working. The question really becomes, what does that kid care about? I had a student that he had all F's, like literally 50 missing assignments at the end of quarter 1, and he didn't care. And he was a foster kid, so there's all that going on. But, it was one of those things, he loved to play basketball. And when we talked after the first lesson, he pretty much said, I want to get good enough grades to play as much basketball as possible. But other than that, I could care less about school. And so we made every single lesson about basketball. If there was a paper to write and we got to pick the subject, we wrote about a basketball player. If we had to do, something science, like we did kinetic energy and potential energy, it's like instead of using a volleyball as an example, we just made it about basketballs. It's the same concepts. It's just tying in his interest. And we were dribbling during sessions. We were doing shooting, we were doing whatever activities we could, not only tying in, being kinesthetic, but then his interest. And so the question becomes, on that type of kid, how do we get their buy-in? And we have to start with what they care about. I mean, maybe it's a sport, maybe it's a certain teacher, maybe it's a certain subject. I mean, we have to figure out what they care about, because everybody cares about something. We just have to actually figure it out and let them tell us what it is that they care about.
Right. It's funny because I had a client too that was a big basketball lover. And so we weren't really working on school so much, but we were just working on, he wanted to become a better player. And I said, well, how can you do that? And he said, practice. I said, well, what would a good practice look like for you? And he wasn't quite sure, but his favorite player was Steph Curry. So I Googled, what is Steph Curry's workout?
There you go.
Okay, this is what he does. He spends this much time doing this, practices all these shots. And he's like, oh, okay. So it's fun. It's fun to get into the kids' worlds and what is meaningful to them and what they like. So here's another question that's related, which is, there's a lot of those boys specifically who just want to play video games. And I have a lot of moms who are really annoyed and very stressed and very frustrated. He just wants to play video games, right? And so it's well, how would you incorporate that interest into studying? And I would, in my mind, think, well, that would be the reward if you studied. But how could you actually, do you have any thoughts? How could you incorporate video games into studying?
It's not the first time I've been asked that question. So you're definitely right that there's the reward aspect. The question that I always have, though, when we talk about the rewards and the motivation piece, is we have to find out what kind of game they play. Because I've dated enough gamers that I've, good or bad, learned there's quests, and then there's the little games. I don't even remember what it's called anymore, but essentially there's games that you can't get to a set point or save point until so many minutes. And it could be an hour or two before they can save, and nobody wants to stop playing any type of game if you're going to lose all your progress.
Roadblocks, is that one of them where it's you just keep going until, or is that?
They're unfortunately geekier than that. So, between Skyrim and some of those, more, whatever the word is, quest games, I think is what they're called. I don't know.
I've seen, my kids have some of those,
and so that can be kind of problem number one, to use it as motivation. But then I have a kid right now that he plays some kind of sports game. And he's like, yeah, I can be done in 5 minutes. So it's okay, well, then that makes sense for that to be a motivation. But I've also had a lot of kids into D&D, and I don't know a lot about D&D, but I know enough to kind of be able to make up stuff, or at least give them some examples. So one of my kids, he's, what's the word I can call a dungeon master, they create the story. And I was like, well, when you're creating these monsters, or their weapons, or, whatever challenges, it could be a math problem. It could be your least favorite subject or topic in something is the bad guy. In order to defeat them, you have to solve this many problems in this many rolls of the dice. If you roll and you get a 3, and that's supposed to be your attack or defense or something like that, well, you have to get this many questions right. Or you have to study for 3 minutes before you can, get past this. So, it could be something as geeky as that. I've had other people that, I tell them to make, I like to use board games more often than video games, but because any board game can be made into their study review game. But, characters can be made into anything related to school too.
Fun. Learning can be fun, right?
Exactly. It takes work. It takes, how creative do you want to be? When I have kids that don't play video games and I have kids that don't play board games, I'm a little no board games. I'm didn't you at least play Candyland? I feel we all started with that. And they're oh yeah. And then I ask them about how the mechanics, and they tell me about the colors and the blocks. And I'm so now each color is a subject, or each color is a chapter if you're studying for just one class.
And then I think this might be obvious, but how does all this information that you have translate to college kids?
So I would tell you it's the same study skills. And I would tell you, when you're talking about, say, note taking with a 7th grader versus a senior in college, it's different, because it might be, 2 or 3 things they wrote down today versus 2 or 3 pages. But at the same time, they're still using the same 7 note taking rules. So the answer is, it's just, it's more mature. It was actually a college kid that we talked about D&D with. So, you can sometimes see on his face, he's like, Jessyka, you're saying it all wrong. But I'm but I'm making sense, right? And he's like, well, yeah, you really mean this. And I was but you're getting it, which is what it's all that matters.
Come on, come on.
Yeah.
Yes. And then what do you teach your clients about self-advocacy?
So that was something else I added pretty recently because it was like already in my program, but I had enough parents asking for it. I'm like, okay, this just needs to be like one entire lesson by itself.
Mm-hmm.
So we talk about kind of what it looks like, and I let them know what the options are. And
Mm-hmm.
something that I found really, really powerful is when we go through some examples like sending an email, talking to the teacher before class, raising your hand in class. Like we talk about what their order of preference is. And that's been something super powerful, I think, because I've had a lot of kids, they're like, I don't ever want to see the teacher before school. And it's like, okay, but now if you know that's what you want, when are you going to find the time and how are you going to ask for help if that's not an option? And then I also make sure the kids know how can you get the help you need in your learning style, because that's a big part of my program is helping kids adapt. Because like I had a history teacher, he talked and talked. I am not an auditory learner. So he could have said nothing and I would have gotten more out of the class if he just would have said, here's the book, figure it out. But then you've got kids that need that talker. So maybe the teacher, when they go to ask for help, is just writing stuff down on a piece of paper saying, go read book 3. That's not helpful. I tell the kids, you've got to get that teacher to meet your learning style. And unfortunately, the teacher is going to teach in the way he or she learns. And if that's not the way you learn, well, then it's up to you to figure it out and to adapt.
Yeah. Yeah. And then what else can you give as just overall guidance for, I don't know why, but it seems like moms are kind of I always say we're the emotional kind of mothership of the home, but also it seems like we're a little bit of the academic. And I know dads are involved in some more than others. Yeah. But what else can you do to kind of encourage, support, motivate moms who, do have kids and, are struggling kind of because their child is struggling? Like what else can you say that would be helpful?
So I would tell you something that I've learned from different discussions and have applied myself is I've had to learn that I can't care about school or about my students' grades more than they do. And I got to say the same thing to our mamas, that you can't care for your kids because that's, you're talking about, getting them to kind of back off, to let go a little bit. If the mama cares more than her son does and her daughter does, then your child has no reason to care, So, it doesn't hurt me. Like you talked about that sting, it doesn't hurt me if I get a C because, whatever, mom's going to call the teacher. I mean, unfortunately, there's a lot of parents now that, it had to happen at school. It couldn't have possibly been something their child did. And yeah, sometimes there's good teachers, sometimes there's bad teachers, but usually something can be done on the child's part that the child's just forgetting to mention to mama.
That is such a fantastic response. And that's actually true with my coaching clients as well. I can't care more about their success than they do. Otherwise it won't work. And kids are very sensitive to this, whether it's through the moms or, me or you or whatever. They have like this spidey sense and they feel it energetically. They're like, oh, they care a lot. So I'm going to step back. Like, right. It's like this kind of like magnet thing, those opposing magnets. And the closer you push, the farther they're going to kind of back up. So it's like, you got to give them some space, let them, decide what they want, ask them what they want, and, allow them to kind of make the moves that they need to make and kind of figure that out. So I do occasionally, and maybe this is a little bit redundant to what we already talked about, but I do occasionally have kind of parent teen situation who they're at a loss. They're like at a loss because they are struggling with friends. They are home. They are, not feeling good about themselves. They're struggling academically. A lot of, I have clients who come to me that are barely about to graduate from high school. Like they might not graduate. And it's very frustrating for me because I'm like, if you would have come to me sooner, right? They always come to me like when it's urgent and like last minute. And it's like very like, oh my gosh, this is like the pressure is on. Do you find that people come to you kind of like, you wish they would have come to you 6 months sooner or a year sooner? Is that kind of a thing?
No, it's 100%. And I think the thing that we can both agree on, Laura, is that it's so much easier to be reactive than proactive. It's so much easier to suddenly be pushed to that point of, okay, this is it. Like, it can't get any worse than this. And it's so easy to keep thinking up to that point, oh, he'll figure it out, or, oh, she knows what she's doing and she'll want to do it eventually. But yeah, that's the reason I've struggled so hard to go. Do I say, I work with tweens? Do I go work with teens, or do I work with college kiddos? Because I want the tweens to come to me. But so many parents, I heard a little bit earlier when you were talking about, 7th grade and grades. So many parents think that grades in middle school don't matter. And I'll admit, here in the States, it seems like a lot of middle schoolers get pushed, which is unfortunate to everybody.
Right.
But the thing is, in middle school, that's the perfect time for our teens to learn how they learn. It's the perfect time to decide, do I want to have a green folder for math or a red folder? Like, literally, does the color matter to me mentally? And does it have any influence on how I view that class? And then also, do I need to write my notes, or can I listen? Because there are some kids, you tell them what their learning style means, and they're like, I don't want to write notes. Well, we talk a couple weeks later. What did you guys talk about 2 weeks ago? I don't know. Did you write it down? No. Well, how else are you going to remember based on your learning style?
Yeah.
So we're going to go through that middle school when it's kind of low risk versus high school, which is, as soon as they take a class, they have a GPA. And just like you said, with the graduating, I've been there, done that. We've had plenty of students where, like I talked about, that basketball student, D, we had 4 days to get his 50 assignments in to make sure he could pass quarter one, so he could then pass semester one and then play next semester.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, I have a couple right now that it's like that graduation is a little curious right now. And it's funny because you and I we run such similar paths, because I too also work with teens and college kids, and it's literally exactly the same. But it's mainly confidence and self-image and these things like that. And if these parents, some of them I have worked with as young as a 9-year-old in 3rd grade, and I have to tell you, it was amazing. We were done in, I don't know, 6 weeks, maybe 8 sessions at the most, because she was young and she's very pliable, and it sticks in, and she implements everything. And now she's great for life. Whereas, I've got a client right now who's a junior in high school, and, I so wish I could have had her 5 years ago, because she's been in the same exact pattern of very negative thinking for all these years. And how those neurons connect. And I was explaining to her how the grooves get deeper and deeper and deeper. And the more you have these negative thoughts, the kind of more challenging it is to get out of it. It's not that you can't do it, but we need to like rezone and go into a more positive lane in our thinking and build those neuron connections. And so I'm like, it's like, well, it's, and that's the thing. And I get it. If you got kids, and everything is a financial investment, and, it's hard to really want to, I'm the mom of 4 kids. It would be hard for me to want to be really proactive about every single aspect of their life. You don't really necessarily do that until there is a very evident, very obvious issue. And you're like, okay, now I'm going to fork over the money to try to fix this problem. So what are your thoughts about that?
Oh, I think you've got the magic word there, investment, because there's a lot of parents, especially when I talk to them in my consultations, and they're like, wow, that price is high. And I'm like, yeah, but think about the fact that it's a life skill. Think about the fact that if we teach your teen how to take better notes, figure out how that calendar, that planner works now, that's the same system your teen's going to use, next year, 5 years from now, when they're in high school, college. And that same system is going to be in place when they have their first job and for, everything they ever want to learn. So the fact is, investment, that's the better word, because it lasts forever. And then, I offer my program and my lessons and all my recordings, for life. So, I give them that too.
Yeah. So it is. It's life. And, it is an investment, because they're investing in their child. They're investing in their child's success. And, it is going to pay off. You're going to more than get your money back, right, when you're, accomplishing or achieving at a higher level. And so I was just curious, and this might not be your lane, but what kind of guidance or, can you offer for kids trying to study for the ACT or SAT?
That's a good question too. So the answer is I do ACT, SAT prep. So that's I do. Yeah. And so I thought that's where I wanted to specialize. That's where I wanted to focus. That's why it's ACE Cookie Tutoring. So it could be ACT, the acronym.
Yeah.
But I would tell you that study skills, you need them for every learning opportunity. And I will admit that there are a lot of study skills that are test taking studies But at the same time, there are some things that, when you sit down and take the ACT, you sit down and take, say, like finals at the end of the term, that, you need certain strategies that aren't really study skills. But I would tell you, though, going back to those learning styles, I have kids that don't take notes when we're going through like the ACT, and part of me goes, annotating can be as simple as, okay, we talked about problem 2. I didn't understand problem 2. I mean, that to me is a study skill right there, marking the problems, because we go through, I try to go through, at least one passage per session, and we're figuring out the pattern. Is it this, not only is it which section, but it's also figuring out what types of questions in each section. And then, I don't know how familiar our listeners are, but, there's different kind of categories of questions in each section on each test. And we've got to figure out, okay, which type of question is your teen struggling with? And then we have to decide, do we care? Because it could be there's like 3 questions of that type in that entire section. It is not worth your time, and definitely not worth your child's time to focus on that type of question unless we're going for a perfect score, because everything else is already as perfect as it can be. And that does happen, but not as often.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I was curious because my daughter's a sophomore, so we are kind of entering that zone of preparing, and she took the PSAT at school, and so that's on our radar right now. So we are getting close to the end of our time together, and so I'm really curious, like, how can someone work with you? Like, what does the process look like, and how do people find you?
Definitely. So I really want mamas to join my Facebook group, so Teaching Teens to Love Learning. So that's an awesome place to start. And then also I really want them to meet me one-on-one with their teens for a free consult. So a great place to do that is at my website. So acecookietutoring.com.
Okay. Good to know. And I encourage any of your, people to follow me at the Positively Healthy Mom. They can jump on my Facebook group. That's a group that is just to support and encourage moms in all kind of areas. It's really kind of encompasses, mind, body, health and wellness, just kind of motivation, support, encouragement, kind of anything that a mom would need to feel successful, and not just successful, from a certain standard, but feel good about herself. And then also to just kind of feel good about being a mom. Because a lot of us moms are, we're beat down, we're worn out, we're exhausted, we're stressed, we're tired, we're overwhelmed. And especially like this time of year, the holidays, it's always like those 3 times of year, the back to school, the holidays, and May, when our minds are kind of just like blowing up, right? Because it's like we can't really take in any more information. So again, invitation to your audience to kind of join me as well. And I'm here to just support and encourage you. So any last words, Jessie?
Oh, just know that the semester is not over till it's over. So if there's things to do, or there's things to study, have your teens do that. That's what I want our mamas to do, and I want their teens to do it for them. But, they might or they might not. We got to hope. We got to encourage.
Right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you for listening to the Positively Healthy Mom podcast, because there's no manual for the hardest job in the world. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends.